Welcome to Microsoft Excel 2019, Lesson 2 with Megan Reese. In this lesson, we're going to be focusing on three main areas: data organization, formulas, and basic functions. First of all, the organization is generally how you organize information. If you want to, how you want to sort it into different ways, using multi-sorts, using a filter, and then also autofill, which is kind of a mainstay of Excel. It's one of the greatest magical elements of Excel that makes so many things possible. So that's why we got to get that in as quick as possible. So it's the first thing we'll be learning about. Then we'll go into formulas and understanding the difference between a formula and a function. Basically, a formula is when you're just adding and subtracting cells, and a function is when you're using a preset math function that's already in Excel, like summing letters together, numbers together, or averaging, or whatever. So there are hundreds of functions. We're just going to be focusing on 6 of them in this lesson, and then later lessons will go into more detail about more advanced functions. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So one of the main things you need to know about Excel is autofill. Super awesome. Excel is really good at finding patterns. So we talked about how if you highlight, if you use a white plus sign, it highlights. And we talked about how you can click on something and drag and it moves it. But autofill, what it does is if you put your cursor on the corner on what's called this fill handle, which we talked about in lesson 1, and you drag, it's going to copy whatever you did. However, if you give it a pattern, if you say 1 and 2 and drag, it goes, oh, okay, you want me to count. And this saves us a lot of time, okay? The important thing is to make sure you show Excel what pattern you want. If you do just the 2, then you're not going to see the pattern, and likely if you do the 1, it's just going to go right over the 2, okay? If I did something like 3 and 6, this is going to give me all my factors of 3, right? Those are your times tables right there, okay? So it can find patterns even when there doesn't seem to be a pattern. Like if you put in weird numbers here, okay? Super weird numbers. I don't know how. Excel, it's the magic of Excel. It will find some sort of pattern. Don't ask me what it is. I'm not smart enough for that. But Excel can do that. So it's very good at figuring out. There's some that are preset. Like if you type in the day of the week, it's going to pull that down. Same with months of the year. It can do dates, right? And you pull that down. If you just pull it down with one date, it'll just do every day. But you could say, oh, actually, I want to do every 2 days. Right? And it will do every 2 days. Okay, so you just have to give it a pattern of what to follow. If you give it text, it doesn't know what to do with text. Okay, if you pull down text, it just repeats text because text doesn't really have a pattern. It's not going to know. But sometimes if you do things like group 1 and group 2, it can still find the pattern. So sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. Just depends on how you typed it in. So that's the beauty of autofill. Now, what's so great about it is it can also do math. So if I have some numbers in here, oops, let's go over here where I haven't formatted it. Okay, so if I have some numbers in here and I add them, we're going to do equals this plus that. Okay, that's a formula. We're going to go over that in a second. But what I want you to see is that I did the math. When I pull it down, it rewrites the math problem for whenever it pulls down. So notice it, and this is really important because we're going to do absolute values, and then you won't be able to get that if you don't understand this. So F1 through G1, F2, G2, F through G3. So it rewrites both sides of the equation to match what's over here. So make sure on your lesson, it's going to show me a picture right here that you did it. So make sure you fill that out over there. And then the formula autofill I just showed you. So we haven't really touched on autofills yet, but there you go. The autofill formatting, I'm just going to do it in what it is in your assignment. It's pretty cool. You can highlight it and it will autofill all the formatting as well. And it copies it all down, which is kind of cool. So sometimes if you have something all formatted and you want a bunch of copies of them, you don't have to copy and paste. You could just autofill them down. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is sorting. And sorting is in the data tab. There are a couple of options here. So this one, the A, Z, and ZA, obviously this is going to be ascending and descending. But this is only good if the very first column you highlight is what you want to sort by. It will always sort by the first column. But say you want to highlight it and sort it by a different column, then you're going to want to use the sort button. So let's say I just want to highlight this one. Notice I included my title up here, okay? And I sort A through Z. If I do that, it's going to say, hey, you've got a whole bunch of stuff here. Did you want to include that? Okay, Most of the time you do. In this case, are these numbers connected to this? If it's not, then I'm going to say, nah, just continue with how I did it. That's fine. And in your assignment, you are going to need to do that a couple times. Okay, there's some times where it's going to ask you and you'll be like, no, they're not connected. But say that this is this person's birthday or something, right? And then I say, oh, I want to do this, and I sort it. Well, then the birthdays all got switched, right? They're not, the right date isn't connected to the right person. So if this information is connected to this person, then I have to make sure that I highlight everything with it. Okay, so then let's say all these are connected to each other. And I say, okay, I want you to sort by, well, if I just do A through Z, that's fine. It knows, okay? But it kept the dates next to each other. Like it kept everything together. So this didn't change, okay? It just changed the order. But if I did this way, this would change and this would stay the same, okay? Now, sorting with this button lets you sort several ways with different levels. So let's say we're like, okay, first I want to sort by the team. And then I want to sort by the name. Okay, there we go. So now team 1s are all together, team 2s are together, 3s are together, and 4s are together, right? Or I could decide, oh no, let's see, actually, let's have them sort by the teacher and then by the date, right? And it will figure that out for me. So all the teachers are together and then they're in order of date. So you have a lot more control over how you want to do that. Now, related to that is filter. Sometimes you want to use sort, sometimes you want to use filter. So we're going to go to data. Now notice when you do sort, this is really important. When you do sort, whatever is the first row you highlight, it's going to be what it sorts by. So you want to make sure you have titles. Otherwise, if you do this, it'll make this the title. So if I do filter, it's not going to work very well because it doesn't have the titles up here. Okay, so you want to make sure you include that so that the filter is on the title name. Okay. So when I have it filtered, I can come in and say, okay, you know what, just show me everything. Like I can do smallest to largest, I can do largest to smallest, okay? And the same thing with names, A through Z, Z through A, date, team, whatever. So team, like say I'm like, oh, I only want to see team 2. And it will actually eliminate everything else. Make no mistake, it's all still there. If you look over here, you see how there's like missing rows. So if you were to like add a bunch of it together, it's going to still add the rows that aren't there. So it can kind of trip you up a little bit. Okay, so when you're done doing a filter, you want to go clear to get it back to where you started. Or I could say, you know what, only show me this teacher, and of those, only show me people who are on team 1. Okay, so I can kind of set it up to do what I want it to do. Another thing you can do, let me clear this out. You know it needs to be cleared if it has that different icon. Okay, so I'm going to clear that. I can also do number filters. So I can say, okay, show me everything that's in the top 10, right? Or show me everything that's above average. And of those, show me everything that has a date that's in April. Okay, so you have a lot more control there. You can also do, see, this one's a date, so you can do date filters, which is kind of cool. What's this month or whatever, okay? Another one you can do for number filters is you can say greater than 4,500, okay? And it's just going to show me those, or greater than or less than, whatever. You can pick that. So those are all the different ways you can filter information. It's a great way to find out data, and you'll find you have a lot of questions that you have to answer in your assignment. So going back to your assignment, you'll have this that you're sorting. Okay, this is that you're filtering, and then you come back over here and you answer all these questions. Now, just a little note, this question here you can't answer until you've done part B because you have to do a formula. You might know enough about formulas now to do it. If you do, great. Otherwise, wait till you've done part B and then come back and finish this later. All right, well that covers autofill, sorting, multi-sort, which is when you do the this one, okay, and filter. Okay, so we've done all those 4. Let's move on to lesson B. So in lesson B, we're going to be learning about formulas, which is what I did up here, okay? Formulas are when you do basically add, subtract, multiply, divide using variables, okay? There's a little bit of algebra in this. So for example, if I have these 2 numbers, okay, I could just type in equals, which by the way, when you're doing math in Excel, you always start with an equal sign. That's how you tell Excel, hi, I'm doing math. And I could type in 15 plus 56. Great. How many answers are there to 15 plus 56? That's right, only 1, okay? So if I have other numbers in here, I just did a whole bunch of the same number. I'm just randomly typing numbers in here. And I drag this down, it's not going to do me any good because it's just going to give me the same answer. It's not related to these numbers because I typed in specific numbers. But if I do equals this, whatever's in this box, plus whatever's in that box, don't click off, press enter always when you're done, okay? And I get the answer, looks the same, but when I drag it down, it knows. And I'm going to warn you right now, I've taken great pains, you have no idea how many pains, to create this lesson in such a way that if you go in here, like I'm going to show you this right now because I just want you to be aware of it. So we're doing equals this plus this, right? So the answer is 876. It changes color, so I know I got it right. If you just look at your neighbor and type 876, you're not going to get points for it, okay? It's actually only going to give you the green if you typed it in correctly. The formula has to be right. Okay, so generally if it doesn't change color, it's because either you just typed a number in or you typed the formula wrong or whatever. So be warned about that. It's a lot of work to make it do that, but I'm magic, so I did. Okay, so that's adding, subtracting, same thing, equals this minus that, right? Well, let's do it this way, equals this minus that, right? And then I can drag that down. Multiply, make sure when you multiply that you're using the star key, okay, which you can find in the, I highly recommend that you turn on your 10 key and use what's over there. It's a little easier to use your 10 key keyboard on your keyboard. And we can drag that one down. And then divide equals this. Make sure you do your forward slash. Again, your 10 key will help you get the right one to that, and press enter, and it will do the division, okay? There's a section about non-adjacent. So you could do equals this plus this, where they're not next to each other. You can also type it in, equals n10, is there anything in 10? No, 12, plus q 15, 14, there we go. So you can type it in, which you might go, well, that took forever, why'd you do that? Trust me, later in this assignment, there are times when it's a lot easier to just type the reference in than it is to go find it and hunt it down. And then you've got like multi-level formulas. Okay, this is when we're starting to get a little more complicated, where we have more than one thing. So we might say equals, say I want to do this plus this, and then I want that total divided by that, okay? But it's not going to be 100% correct. Sometimes it works out, but depending on what kind of math problem it is, you want to always use parentheses because then you can be sure it's correct. So if I do equals, open parentheses, this, I don't know if I added that or not, I can't remember, plus this, close parentheses, divide that total by that, okay? And I believe, yeah, see, look, I got a completely different answer, okay? And that's because in this problem, it's only dividing O12 by P12. In this problem, it's dividing the total of these two numbers by P12, okay? So whenever it's a multi-formula, always do parentheses. Remember, the way this is written, in order to get the correct points, if you type it in like that, it's not going to count because it's looking for the parentheses. It has to be exactly correct or you won't get it, okay? And sometimes you might have two of those, like equals this plus this divided by the, oops, another parenthesis, this times that, sure, okay? So sometimes you might have two sets going in. Okay, so that's multi-level formulas. I just want to point out, there's a couple places in here I noticed when I was going through my solution video that it can be kind of hard because you go to type in and it covers up this so you can't click on it. So if that ever happens, I would just widen it, do the problem, and then bring it back when you're done. Because I found that really annoying that I couldn't click on anything. I try to make it so that that doesn't happen, but I don't always get it. All right, the next thing is percentages, and it always amazes me how many of my ninth graders don't know how to get a percentage. Because this is the kind of math that you need to know to be a functioning adult, not just to get a good score on a math test that no one will ever ask you about ever again the rest of your life. So it's just important you know how to do that. As an adult, you're always calculating percentages. Doesn't mean you have to be able to do the math in your head, but you should know how to set up the problem. That's what I love about Excel. I'm actually not very mathy, but I love that it does the calculating for me. I just need to know how to set it up. So if I have a number like this, and I want to know what 16% is. Now, little thing, if I type, I think we learned this in the last lesson. If If I do 16%, it's going to be 1600. So make sure I do 0.16, right? And then I change it to a percentage. So if I want to know what 16% of that is, then I need to do equals this times 16%. Okay. Now, if you wanted to type it in, equals this times 0.16. I have had kids do equals this times 16%, and to my shock, it actually works. But be warned, if you do that on any of my assignments, it probably won't work because I don't do that. So when I set it up to know exactly what to type in, it won't think that's right. So it's going to be like this. I'm going to expect you to move the decimal. Why do I do it that way? Because you should know how to move a decimal. That's, again, math you need to know to be a functioning adult. So to make 16%, it's less than 1, right? It's a percentage of it, so it's going to be 0.16. So make sure you know how to move your decimals on that. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is absolute values. And I cannot emphasize enough how much you're going to need this in the application. Okay, we use this a lot. I use this all the time. So one of the problems with, I'm going to delete all this because it's a lot of stuff. Okay, one of the problems with autofill is that there's a price for it. Okay, there's a price for autofill. So if I do equals this plus this and drag it down, that's awesome. But sometimes you don't want to copy both sides of the equation. What if it's something like this, where I want each of these to be times, let's make that a different number, each of these numbers to be timed by the same number. So I want this side to change, but not this side. So now what happens is it's saying 15, is it plus? 15 plus 56 gave me the answer, but then this one, it just does 78 and 87 because there's nothing in here. See? So it's copying both sides down, but there's nothing in this side. So I'm really not getting the answer that I wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do equals this plus this. And when I click on the second one, I'm going to press F4, which puts these little weird dollar signs in. Okay, F4 meaning the function key along the top of your keyboard, not an F and a 4. The F4 function key. Okay, or you can just by hand type in the dollar signs. Notice I push F4 again, I can take it out. So I just pushed it once and then I pushed it twice. So, you know, like that would just hold on to the 12, but not the O. That would hold on to the O, but not the 12. And then this one holds on to both. Okay, anyway. So I've done that. And now when I click down, it does the math because see how N12, N13, N14, but O12 is staying the same. Okay, so the absolute value allows you to keep one side that doesn't move. Okay, and that can be great, and sometimes it can be hard, and you have to learn to kind of think ahead and ask when you need an absolute value or not. And you're going to see in your application today that it works against us at one point. Like we have to do it the long way so it doesn't work against us later, and you'll see that. And I kind of engineered it that way so you can see the advantages and the disadvantages to using an absolute value. Okay, the next one is references. And I mean like each of these is a reference. Like this is, N4 is a reference. But the whole point is that I can come over here and I can do equals that, and it will bring it over. Okay, I use this a lot in so many different ways. And you can do it on different sheets. Like say I have, I'm just going to move this over here. Okay, so say I have a sheet over here, I can do equals this sheet, and then I click on it. And notice over here it says sheet 2, exclamation point, M24. And it will actually find that. So you can pull references from other places. It's just an important concept to understand. We use that a lot. All right, moving right along, we're done with part B. We're going to go ahead and move on to part C, which is all about functions. Okay, so all along we've been doing all these plus and minus stuff. Okay, functions, most of the ones we're going to learn are over here in the auto sum. So basically what it does is it lets me take a whole bunch of it. Like imagine if I did formulas with this. I wanted to add all these numbers together. I'd have to do equals this plus this plus this plus this plus this plus, like how obnoxious is that? Okay, which by the way, that is what you need to do on that last question. So just going over that really quickly, just to give you guys a little help there. When you get to this last question right here, where it says how much money was raised in Louisiana, how use a formula, you're going to want to sort it and then come over to the side and do equals this plus this to get through that. Okay, so there are times when you have to do that because some won't work on this one. Don't try to use some. Make sure you use a formula. There's a way around it, but I'm not going to go into it. Okay, so but sum allows me to highlight all this information and then to just push auto sum and it adds all up together. It's beautiful, lovely. okay? And notice how it looks. Equals, and then it has in all caps, sum, which is one of the many functions. If I click on function right here, there are tons and tons of functions, okay, that you can see. So these are the functions that I've used recently. Well, I've not used all of those, but there's so many. There are so many functions in here. I've been using this Excel for, I don't know, 20 years, and more than half of these, the majority of these, I have no idea what they do, okay? So these are just functions that are pre-programmed into Excel that if you know how to use them, they make things short. They shorten things up. And they can get pretty complicated, but sum is your most basic function. You can also add them all together. You can average them. Okay, now if you had a calculator, this would be a pain in the butt to average this with a calculator. You'd have to add all these together, this plus this plus this plus this, and then you have to count how many there are and divide it by that number. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. To average a long column of numbers with a calculator is kind of a nightmare. So this is much easier, right? I just highlight all the numbers I want to average, pull down the arrow, and average them together. Okay. The other one is max. Max will tell me what the highest number in the list is. Okay. And min will tell me what the lowest number is. And then finally, there's count. Count will tell me how many numbers there are. Counting, it does not have to be all in one row. Okay. Okay, so I just got some more numbers in here. So if I wanted to count like that, and then do count, it'll count the number. So that was kind of cool because it counted each row, okay? But if I wanted to count them all as one, I do equals count and highlight them both like that, and it will count all of them, okay? So you don't have to count, but you can only count numbers with count. I couldn't count this, okay? I can't do equals count and do text. It's going to get confused. It doesn't know how to count that. Unless I add a in front of it, by the way, then it will count it. Counting A, meaning counting text. Not one we're covering, but just so you know. So sometimes, though, you need to add numbers that are and where the answer is not conveniently right where you want it. Like, say I want the answer, the sum of this over here. So I can just do equals sum. I have to type it in myself, right? So I do sum, open parentheses, highlight it, and close it. Okay, just press enter when you're done. You don't have to type the final parenthesis. It will automatically put it in if you press enter. So that's when it's non-adjacent. Okay, so maybe it's max and this, enter, and it'll figure it out. Okay, so sometimes you have to do it when it's non-adjacent. Just a little side note on your assignment here. When you do this and you drag it over, you might think it's wrong, but once you pull it down, it'll change colors. So I just want to point that out because I'm worried that kids will miss that. Okay. All right. This is one of those ones I was telling you about earlier where it's easier to just type it in, where you just do equals, average, and then just type them. Like just type in A10 or whatever. It's a lot easier than having to go find it where it is. So just FYI. Now the last function I'm going to teach you in this area, in this lesson, is round. And I chose round because I didn't want to just make you feel like this is all there is, okay, that are preset and easy. Rounding is the first one that we're going to learn that requires more than one argument, okay? So more complex formulas or functions have more than one argument, okay? So what I mean by that is when I do equals and I type round, and open parenthesis, notice it tells me what my two arguments are. First it wants to know what the number is that I want to round, comma, and then how many digits I'm going to round it. Okay. Other functions, like we're not going to do this one till much later, but like the lookup, look how many different things it needs to know. The lookup value, the table array, the column. It needs 4 arguments, 4 things in commas for that to work. Okay. We're not going to go into that today, but those are what arguments are. So I'm going to do round. First it wants to know the number. Okay, which I actually put this in a place where I can't see the number, so let's do it over here. Equals round, okay, and I'm going to click on the number, then I'm going to do a comma, and now it wants to know how many digits am I going to round it. Okay, so this is a scale of 0 to negatives and positives. If I do 0, and you can close it or you just press enter, it's going to round it and get rid of the decimals. It makes it a whole number, okay? If I do 1, it's going to give me 1 decimal to the right. If I do -1, it's going to go the other direction. It's going to go up 1 level to the left. So you can go several directions depending on how many numbers you have. So if I did like -6, that's going to go too far. I don't have 6 numbers on either side. It's too high. But if it was a big number, then I could. If I did 4, same thing. Okay, I only have 4 numbers. But maybe if I make that a -3, now it makes sense. So it rounded it to the nearest thousandth, right? So that pushed it up, because 1547 is going to push it up to 2000, right? And again, if I go to a solid 3 on the other side, I've got the 3 digits on. It's just narrowed it down to 3 digits instead of 4. So that's how the rounding works. Now, with those arguments, you can include other things. So right now I'm just doing one number. What if it's a math problem? Okay, what if I said equals round this plus this with a formula, right? And then I actually don't have to close it. I'm just going to do, there's my first one. My number is N8 plus N9. That's my number. Comma, how many digits? Oh, let's do 2. There we go. Okay, I don't know if 2 actually works. Probably -2 would be better. Yeah, okay. So notice the syntax on that. I was able to keep it inside the parentheses. Now, an exception to that, there's only one place in your assignment where you have to do this, on this particular assignment, where you have to combine a function and round. Okay, so before we just did, this one is a formula, right? Pretty simple. Function is, well, you have to do it nested, because we have 2 functions. Round is a function, sum is a function. So I do equals round sum. Crazy, right? And then say I add all these numbers together. Okay, I'm going to close that, then put my comma in and say, let's do it to -2, right? And there it works. Okay, a little bit crazy. There's only one place where I ask you to do that, and I actually kind of show you how to type it in. It's actually in part D, right here, this one. Okay, and notice I have a comment in there that kind of tells you what to do. So if you don't remember, but that's the only place where I ask you to do it on this particular assignment. But later in the future, we will be doing more nesting of different functions. Okay, so we have done add and subtract, multi-lever formulas, absolute values, percentages, and references, and now we've done all of these different types. The next section is combining formulas and functions. So section D here. So what I mean by that is sometimes you're doing equals sum of this plus that, close it, and then divide that by 8 or something. So it's when you're kind of doing both. You're kind of combining a couple of things, right? So that's combining them. Like in your assignment, it'll ask you several ways that you would do that. How you would put the 2 together. Okay, the next part is naming ranges. This is kind of just a shortcut, so you don't have to constantly be highlighting stuff. Like if you have something that you're always using, like maybe the sum of these numbers I use a lot for different things. So I can actually give it a name. I can give it a named range. So let's say I take these numbers and I would just type in numbers, or whatever I want to call it. Okay, type it up here into the name box. And now you'll notice there's a little arrow here that lets me go straight to it. So if I'm over here, okay, I can just pull this arrow down and go right to it. I can also do Control G, which goes to, and it'll show me where all of my different name boxes are. So you can name them whatever you want. Oops. Okay, and now I have all these, oops, there you go, press enter. I didn't press enter. So now I have these different ones that I can go to. So that's the thing that's cool about that is you can later do math with it. So, let's say I don't want this one. We'll get to that in a second. This one I just created and there's nothing in it and I don't really want it and I changed my mind. So I'm going to go to data and I'm going to go to, not data, sorry. I'm going to go to formulas, name manager, and it will show me all of them. And this is the one I want to get rid of. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to delete it. Okay. So that's how you get rid of a named range if you don't like it. Sometimes I create the named range and then I realize it was wrong and I need to fix it. So that's the only way to really do that. So I've got 2 ranges now, numbers and range 2. Okay, so now I can do equals sum range 2 and numbers, and it does math for me. So I don't have to go in and highlight it, especially if it's on another sheet. You know, maybe it's over here on another sheet and you don't want to have to keep going back and forth. It can make it a lot easier. And then later when we get into more, it actually kind of works like an absolute value, right? Because then when I drag it down, it's going to keep it the same no matter what. Okay, so for example, let's say I've got, okay, and I want to do equals this times the sum of range 1, or range 2, right? When I drag it down, it keeps range 2 the whole way down. See that? So it kind of works like an absolute value, but it doesn't always work. It's better when you have a range instead of an individual box, although you could use it that way if you really wanted to. So that's what changing names, naming ranges does. Even if you don't know where a range is, so you could just come up here and you can find it. So I think in the lesson it tells you to go find one. It'll just show all the ranges. It'll take you straight to it. Okay, so we've learned how to combine them. We've got named ranges, manipulating ranges, and identifying formulas and functions. That one's kind of up to you. That's a section that just says, okay, what would you use to do this? You know, if I wanted to use a function to round the total, is that going to be, what would I do? So making sure, because a lot of times in the MOS test, it might say something like, you know, add these things together. It doesn't tell you to use sum. So you have to figure out when is the best time, or what would be the best way to accomplish this, okay? And as you get them right, the checks will come. So you'll notice that when you get things right, you either get a check or it changes color. The color changing is conditional formatting. We're going to learn that in the next lesson. And the box changing is a little more intense. That's an if function, which we won't get till much, much later. But anyway, that's your thing. When you are done, you're going to want to print this cover sheet. So make sure that, make sure you've answered the questions, that you'll do this with the application. You're going to print this cover sheet. You'll also print the application when it's finished, which looks like garbage now, but will look awesome when it's done. So that's about it. Lesson 2 is complete. Good luck, and we will see you in lesson 3.